The Galactic Federation Academy wasn't just any school, it was the school, the pinnacle of interspecies education where the best and brightest from across 17 galaxies came to learn how not to kill each other while sharing the same cosmic neighborhood. The campus itself was a marvel of engineering, a massive rotating space station that resembled a giant metallic donut with sprinkles, if sprinkles were laser defense systems and gravity modulators. In the grand scheme of galactic civilization, humans were the equivalent of that cousin nobody wanted to invite to the family reunion but had to because they showed up anyway. Earth had stumbled into faster-than-light travel not through centuries of careful research, but by some idiot in Nebraska accidentally creating a wormhole while trying to make a better toaster. Classic humanity. Cadet Jack Harper stood in the middle of the Academy's main atrium, trying not to look impressed. Around him, beings of every conceivable shape floated, slithered, and undulated their way to class. There was a group of Arcturians with their translucent skin showing their 3 hearts beating in perfect synchronization. A cluster of Zeptoids hovered nearby, their gas balloon bodies bouncing gently against the ceiling. And then there were the Vexorians, tall muscular blue-skinned humanoids with ridges for eyebrows that made them look perpetually angry. Another day in Space High School, Jack muttered to himself. Except instead of worrying about prom, I'm trying not to cause an interplanetary incident by sneezing wrong. Jack checked his schedule on his wrist computer, Xenobiology, Advanced Warp Mechanics, and History of Galactic Diplomacy. He groaned. The history class was taught by Professor Nex Voon, a sentient fungus colony who spoke entirely in spores that made humans hallucinate their lectures. Last week Jack had spent 3 hours convinced he was a potted plant. As he made his way toward the East Wing, the station-wide announcement system chimed. Attention all cadets and faculty, General Vrex Crux of the Vexorian High Command will be inspecting the Academy today. All personnel are to be on their best behavior. Remember, an insult to the General is an insult to the entire Vexorian Empire, punishable by having your molecules scattered across the nearest star. Have a pleasant academic day. The cheerful tone of the announcement did nothing to mask the obvious threat. Jack felt a knot form in his stomach. Vexorians were notoriously touchy, and humans were notoriously good at touching nerves. It was like putting a match next to a tank of jet fuel and hoping nothing exciting would happen. Just keep your head down, Jack whispered to himself. Don't make eye contact, don't breathe too loudly, and for the love of everything, don't mention their failed invasion of the Crab Nebula. Of course that was the moment when the crowd of students parted like a sea, revealing the imposing figure of General Crux himself, flanked by aides and security drones. The general's blue skin seemed to pulse with barely contained rage, his uniform adorned with so many medals it was a wonder he could stand upright. And he was headed straight for the human section of the atrium. Jack Harper wasn't your typical human cadet. Back on Earth he'd been that guy who could recite every line from obscure sci-fi shows and had once won a hot dog eating contest by consuming 27 wieners in 3 minutes flat. Not exactly the credentials the Academy typically looked for, but Jack had one quality that made him invaluable. He was pathologically incapable of taking anything seriously, which somehow translated to diplomatic immunity in a universe where everyone else had the sense of humor of a black hole. His roommate Zentar, a 6-limbed proximan with emerald scales and a voice that sounded like someone gargling marbles, sidled up beside him. "You're in trouble," Zentar whispered, which came out as a series of clicks and hisses. The universal translator hanging from Jack's ear converted it to English with a cheerful beep. "What did I do now? I swear I didn't know that plant in the cafeteria was sentient." "It looked like lettuce," Jack protested. "Not that." Zentar pointed with 3 of his limbs. "General Crux. He hates humans more than anyone in the galaxy. Rumor has it he keeps a collection of human tears in vials." Jack squinted at the approaching general. "That's oddly specific and completely disturbing." General Vrex Crux stomped through the atrium like he owned it, which technically, given the Vexorian Empire's financial contributions to the Academy, he partially did. His face was a masterpiece of evolutionary anger, ridge-like eyebrows permanently furrowed, jaw set in a permanent sneer, and eyes that could probably boil water at 20 paces. "I heard he once made a Glesian diplomat spontaneously molt just by staring at him," Zentar continued. "That's biologically impossible," Jack muttered. "So is surviving on a diet of what you humans call gas station sushi, but you manage somehow." Before Jack could defend humanity's questionable culinary choices, General Crux stopped directly in front of them. The rest of the cadets formed a wide circle, maintaining what they hoped was a safe blast radius. "So," the general's voice rumbled like distant thunder, "this is the human delegation. I expected more." Height. Jack stood at 5'9", which was average on Earth but practically miniature compared to the 7-foot-tall Vexorian. We make up for it with our sparkling personalities, sir. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The translator must have conveyed Jack's sarcasm perfectly. The general's aide, a nervous-looking Vexorian named Lieutenant Drax, leaned over. General, perhaps we should move on to the quantum physics department. I hear they've made fascinating advances in particle. Silence, Crux barked. He leaned down, bringing his face uncomfortably close to Jack's. Do you know why humans were the last species invited to join the Galactic Federation, Cadet? Jack swallowed hard. Our tendency to put pineapple on pizza, sir. Another gasp from the crowd. Somewhere, a student dropped their datapad in shock. The general's face darkened to a deeper shade of blue. Insolence. You humans think the universe is one big joke. You stumble into space travel by accident, and suddenly you expect to be treated as equals. The Vexorian Empire was exploring the stars when your ancestors were still figuring out which end of a spear to hold. Jack knew he should stay quiet. Every rational brain cell was screaming at him to shut up. But rational brain cells had never been his strong suit. Yet somehow we figured out that faster-than-light travel doesn't require sacrificing 7 virgins to the space gods, which I hear was the Vexorian method for centuries. The atrium went dead silent. Even the ambient hum of the station's life support system seemed to hold its breath. General Crux's face contorted with fury. His right hand shot up faster than Jack could track and delivered a resounding slap across the human's face. The sound echoed through the atrium like a gunshot. Learn your place, human, Crux snarled. Jack's head snapped to the side from the impact. Slowly, he turned back to face the general, a red handprint forming on his cheek. But instead of fear or anger, a smile spread across his face. A smile that made even Zentar take several steps back. "Oh, General," Jack said softly, his voice filled with something that sounded almost like pity. "You really shouldn't have done that." The general's expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty. "And why is that, human?" Jack glanced at his wrist computer. "Because in exactly 3 seconds you're going to regret it more than the time your species tried to invade the Crab Nebula. 3, 2, 1. General Crux's expression transformed from smug superiority to wide-eyed panic as Jack's skin began to change. The handprint, bright red just moments ago, darkened dramatically, then spread across the human's face like spilled ink. "What is this? Was this?" Crux stumbled back, antenna ridges twitching in alarm. Jack remained perfectly still, that unnerving smile never leaving his face. "This, General, is why you don't slap a human. We're basically walking biological hazard containers." The black discoloration continued spreading, tiny tendrils of darkness reaching toward Jack's neck and ears. The crowd of cadets collectively retreated another few steps. "Explain yourself immediately," Crux demanded, though his voice had lost its thunderous quality, and now carried a distinct note of panic. Lieutenant Drax frantically consulted his data tablet. "General, I'm reading an exponential increase in chemical compounds being released from the human's epidermis. Analysis shows." His voice trailed off, mandibles clicking in distress. "Shows what?" Crux snapped. "Compound HRV3NG3. It's unique to humans." Drax looked up, his eyes wide. "Sir, it's highly contagious to Vexorian physiology." The gathered crowd gasped and retreated further, forming an even wider circle around the unfolding drama. Zentar, proving the superior wisdom of the Proximan species, had already retreated behind a structural column. Jack raised his eyebrows innocently. "Oh, did nobody brief you on human defense mechanisms? We evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us, including the air. When threatened, our bodies release a cocktail of chemicals, completely harmless to us, of course." Crux's blue skin began to take on a sickly purple hue. "What does it do to Vexorians?" he demanded, voice cracking. "Nothing permanent," Jack said casually, inspecting his fingernails. "Unless you consider total public humiliation permanent." As if on cue, General Crux's immaculate uniform began to feel uncomfortably tight. A strange gurgling sound emanated from his midsection, followed by what could only be described as the galaxy's most dignified military leader, experiencing the galaxy's least dignified bodily function. The general's antenna ridges flattened against his skull in mortification. "That's just Phase 1, Jack informed him helpfully. "Phase 2 kicks in about now." Crux opened his mouth to issue what was surely going to be a threat of planetary annihilation, but what came out instead was a high-pitched squeak, like a mouse being stepped on very, very gently. The atrium erupted in poorly suppressed snickers. Even Lieutenant Drax had to turn away, shoulders shaking with the effort to maintain composure. "The compound temporarily reconfigures Vexorian vocal cords," Jack explained to the horrified general. "Don't worry, You'll be back to terrorizing subordinates with that booming voice in about 6 hours. Crux's face contorted with rage, but his attempts at shouting orders resulted in a series of squeaks that sounded like a rubber toy orchestra. He stabbed a finger at his security drones, clearly ordering them to arrest Jack, but the machines remained motionless. Oh, I should mention, Jack added, the chemical reaction creates a small electromagnetic pulse that temporarily disrupts Vexorian tech within a 3-meter radius. Another quirky human defense mechanism. Evolution is wild, right? Professor Nexvoon, the fungus colony, had floated closer during the commotion. Through a small translator device, the professor's spores formed words. Fascinating biological response. Human cadet, permission to collect samples for scientific study. Maybe later, Professor, Jack replied. I think the General and I are having a moment. Crux, now emitting squeaks at a frantic pace, pointed accusingly at Jack while frantically signaling to his aide. Lieutenant Drax stepped forward, maintaining a safe distance. The General wishes to know how to counteract these effects. Jack tapped his chin thoughtfully. Well, there is an antidote. Hope flashed across Crux's purple-tinged face. But, Jack continued, I'm not sure the General would be willing to do what's necessary to get it. Every eye in the atrium was now fixed on the unfolding spectacle, hundreds of cadets and faculty members witnessing the mighty General Crux reduced to a squeaking, purple-faced shadow of himself. And the situation was about to get much, much worse. You see, Jack continued, maintaining direct eye contact with the increasingly distressed General. Humans developed this defense mechanism after our first contact with the Andromeda cluster. Turns out, having strangers from space show up and start poking at you leads to some interesting evolutionary adaptations. Crux emitted a series of rapid-fire squeaks that, despite the translator's best efforts, came through as something like, fix this now, or, face extinction. The black discoloration on Jack's face had stopped spreading but now glistened with an iridescent sheen that caught the light in mesmerizing patterns. Several science cadets had started recording the phenomenon on their datapads. Professor Nexvoon's spores formed another message. This reaction is not in any Federation medical database. That's because we petitioned to have it classified, Jack explained. Can't have our one defensive advantage becoming common knowledge. Lieutenant Drax frantically consulted his tablet again. Sir, I'm detecting further changes in the General's biochemistry. Phase 3 appears to be imminent. Crux's eyes widened in horror. Phase 3, Jack confirmed with a solemn nod. That's when things get really interesting. As if on cue, the General's rigid military posture began to falter. His knees buckled slightly, and his typically menacing stance softened. Most alarmingly, his perpetual scowl began to twitch at the corners. The human defense compound affects the Vexorian emotional centers, Jack informed the crowd, adopting the tone of a nature documentary narrator. Phase 3 typically manifests as, before he could finish, General Crux did the unthinkable. He smiled. Not just any smile, but a broad, uncontrollable grin that stretched across his face, revealing rows of perfectly maintained military-grade teeth. The collective gasp from the crowd was so forceful it nearly triggered the station's decompression warnings. Uncontrollable emotional expression, Jack finished. Crux's hands flew to his face, trying to physically force his facial muscles back into their customary scowl, but the effect was unstoppable. Worse still, a sound began to emerge from his throat, a sound no one in the history of the galaxy had ever heard from a Vexorian general. He was giggling. Lieutenant Drax looked like he was about to faint. This is unprecedented. General Crux hasn't smiled since the Great Nebula victory of 2347, and that was only for the official portrait. The giggling escalated to full-blown laughter. Tears streamed down Crux's purple face as his body shook with mirth. Several cadets had begun backing toward the exits, clearly concerned that the universe might be collapsing. Don't worry, Jack reassured everyone. He's not in any pain. Well, except maybe to his dignity. But the true plot twist came when Cadet Lysandra, a Centaurian with advanced empathic abilities, pushed through the crowd, her antenna twitching with concern. You're lying, she declared, pointing at Jack. I sense no chemical reaction. There is no defense mechanism. All eyes turned to Jack, who maintained his poker face admirably. I don't know what you're talking about, he said smoothly. The human defense reaction is well documented and classified. Biochemically impossible, interrupted Professor Nexvoon's translator. My spores detect no unusual compounds beyond standard human stress hormones. Jack's confident facade began to crack as Lysandra continued. He's bluffing. Humans have no such defense mechanism. The general is experiencing a psychosomatic reaction to the belief that he's been poisoned. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the truth dawned. Jack Harper had pulled off the greatest bluff in Academy history. He'd convinced a Vexorian general, and the entire Academy, that humans possessed a biological defense weapon, when in reality, they had nothing of the sort. Jack shrugged, dropping the act. Worth a shot. And hey, it worked, didn't it? But his victory was short-lived. As the realization hit General Crux that he'd been duped, his laughter abruptly ceased. The purple tinge of his skin darkened to a dangerous indigo, not from any human toxin, but from pure unadulterated Vexorian rage. "You," Crux squeaked, the high pitch making his fury somehow more terrifying, "have just committed an act of psychological warfare against a commanding officer of the Vexorian Empire." The security drones, no longer affected by a non-existent EMP, reactivated and trained their weapons on Jack. "In my defense," Jack offered weakly, "you did slap me first." The atrium had transformed from an academic gathering space into what felt like the final scene of a galactic drama. General Crux's security drones hovered menacingly, their targeting systems painting crimson dots across Jack's chest. The Academy's emergency containment fields had automatically activated, trapping everyone inside until the conflict resolved, standard protocol for preventing interspecies diplomatic incidents from escalating into interstellar war. "This human has committed treason against the Vexorian Empire," Crux squeaked, each high-pitched word undermining his attempt at intimidation. "Under Galactic Code 359B, I demand immediate custody of the offender for trial on Vexor Prime." Zentar, showing unexpected courage, slithered forward. "But General, Galactic Code 359B specifically requires physical assault as the triggering offense. By slapping Cadet Harper first, you technically violated Section C of the same code." Lieutenant Drax checked his tablet and winced. "He's right, sir. The Proximan knows his interstellar law." "Irrelevant," Crux squeaked, his voice cracking on the final syllable. This was a calculated act of humiliation against a superior officer. "Actually," came a new voice, calm and measured, "this presents a fascinating legal conundrum." The crowd parted to reveal Admiral Thalia Okafor, the Academy's commandant. A human woman in her 60s with silver hair, pulled into a tight bun, and posture that would make a laser beam look crooked. Admiral Okafor had been navigating interspecies politics since before most cadets were born. "Admiral," Crux attempted to regain his dignity despite his cartoonish voice, "this is a matter for the Vexorian Empire to handle." "On my station, all matters are my matters, General," Okafor replied, her tone suggesting this wasn't up for debate. "And as it happens, we have a perfect opportunity to demonstrate practical diplomatic problem-solving to our cadets." She turned to Jack, her expression making it abundantly clear that he was in no less trouble. "Cadet Harper, explain your actions." Jack straightened, knowing his next words might determine whether he graduated or spent the next decade in a Vexorian prison mine. "Admiral, humans have been consistently undermined and dismissed in the galactic community. When physically assaulted, I employed the only defense available to me, psychological leverage." "You mean you lied?" Crux squeaked. "I created a diplomatic fiction," Jack corrected. "A practice not uncommon in galactic politics, as I learned in history of galactic diplomacy. The Vexorian Empire itself once convinced the Rigelians that Vexorian tears could cure scale rot, thus securing exclusive mining rights in the Rigelian asteroid belt." Crux's face darkened further, but Admiral Okafor raised an eyebrow, impressed by Jack's homework. "The difference," Crux protested, "is that our deception didn't make the Supreme Commander of the Rigelian forces look like a fool in front of hundreds of witnesses." "Sir, with all due respect," Jack replied, "you did that all by yourself when you decided to slap a cadet half your size." The crowd collectively held their breath. Lieutenant Drax looked like he was calculating the fastest escape route to the nearest shuttle bay. Admiral Okafor held up her hand before Crux could respond. "Both parties have valid grievances. General Crux violated Academy regulations by physically assaulting a cadet. Cadet Harper violated ethical standards by fabricating a biological threat. This situation demands a proportional resolution." She turned to face the general directly. "The Galactic Federation values the Vexorian Empire's contribution to our shared security. However, we cannot allow physical assault within these halls regardless of rank or species." "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" Crux asked, his squeaky voice undermining his attempt at maintaining authority. "A mutual acknowledgement of fault," she replied. "You will formally apologize for the physical assault. Cadet Harper will apologize for his deception, and spend the next month studying Vexorian cultural etiquette under your lieutenant's supervision." Jack opened his mouth to protest, but quickly thought better of it when he caught the Admiral's eye. Crux puffed up indignantly. "A Vexorian general does not apologize to cadets. Then a Vexorian general should not slap cadets," Okafor countered evenly. The alternative is a formal complaint to the Galactic Council, where this entire incident, including the security footage showing you striking a cadet and then squeaking like a Martian field mouse, becomes public record. The atrium fell silent as Crux processed his options. His reputation would never recover from such exposure. Furthermore, Admiral Okafor continued, pressing her advantage, this presents an opportunity to demonstrate the legendary Vexorian commitment to justice and proportional response. Your people are renowned for their strict but fair military code. Surely that extends to acknowledging when a line has been crossed. It was a masterful stroke, appealing to the Vexorian sense of honor while offering a face-saving way out. General Crux stood frozen, calculating political trajectories and personal consequences. Finally, he spoke, each squeaky word carefully measured. The Vexorian Empire recognizes the importance of maintaining proper protocols when interacting with junior species. That's not quite an apology, Jack muttered, earning a sharp look from the Admiral. Crux continued, visibly struggling with each word. I regret that physical force was employed in a teaching environment. It was inappropriate. Admiral Okafor nodded, then turned expectantly to Jack. Jack squared his shoulders. I apologize for convincing you that humans secrete toxic compounds when slapped. We don't, though it would be really convenient if we did. The Admiral shot him a warning glance, and Jack added hastily, I look forward to studying Vexorian cultural etiquette under Lieutenant Drax's guidance. Drax looked like he'd rather jump out an airlock than spend a month tutoring Jack Harper, but he nodded dutifully. Excellent, Admiral Okafor declared. General, our medical staff can provide something for your vocal situation. I believe it will resolve naturally within a few hours, but we can expedite the recovery. As the security drones powered down and the containment fields deactivated, Admiral Okafor addressed the crowd of cadets. Class dismissed. I expect comprehensive essays on the ethical and diplomatic implications of today's events by next week. A collective groan rose from the assembled students. As General Crux was escorted to the medical bay, he paused beside Jack, leaning in close. This isn't over, human, he squeaked, somehow making the ridiculous sound menacing. Looking forward to our cultural exchange, General, Jack replied with a grin. I have so many questions about Vexorian traditions, like, is it true your species communicates complex emotions through interpretive dance during formal ceremonies? Crux's eyes widened in horror as Jack continued, because I've been practicing my moves for the upcoming Galactic Unity Festival, and I'd love some authentic feedback. The general hurried away, his squeaking protests fading down the corridor. 2 weeks after the infamous squeaking general incident, the Academy had settled into a new normal. The event had spawned countless memes across the Galactic Infonet, with animated GIFs of squeaking Vexorian commanders becoming the standard response to any pompous statement in interstellar forums. Though the Academy had attempted to contain the footage, nothing spreads faster than suppressed entertainment, and within days, bootleg recordings had reached every corner of charted space. Jack strolled into the advanced xenobiology lab, where Zentor was carefully dissecting a specimen of Jovian psychic algae. The Proximan looked up, all 6 eyes blinking in sequence. How was today's cultural sensitivity training with Lieutenant Drax? Zentor asked, setting down his dissection tools. Jack slid onto a stool, dropping a stack of Vexorian cultural texts on the counter with a heavy thud. Did you know that Vexorians have 73 different words for military formation but not a single word for relaxation? That explains so much. I heard the lieutenant has been making you recite the entire Vexorian military code, Zentor said, his emerald scales shimmering with amusement. Backwards and in the traditional Vexorian war chant style, Jack confirmed. My throat feels like I swallowed a plasma grenade, but I did learn something interesting today. He leaned forward conspiratorially, Zentor's eye stalks extended with curiosity. Apparently, my little bluff wasn't entirely fiction. Lieutenant Drax has been researching human biology, and guess what? Our sweat actually does contain compounds that can trigger mild allergic reactions in Vexorian physiology. Nothing like what I described, but enough to cause discomfort. Zentor's mandibles clicked in surprise. So you were accidentally right, the best kind of right, Jack grinned. The Vexorian High Command has issued a directive requiring all personnel to maintain a minimum 2-meter distance from humans during diplomatic engagements, just to be safe. The lecture hall doors slid open, and a stream of cadets flowed in for the afternoon session. Among them was Cadet Lysandra, the Centaurian empath whose intervention had exposed Jack's bluff. She took a seat nearby, her antenna twitching in acknowledgement. Impressive improvisation during the general's visit, she said. though ethically questionable. Coming from someone who can literally read emotions, that means a lot, Jack replied. I couldn't actually read your emotions, Lysandra admitted. Human brainwaves are unusually chaotic. It's like trying to listen to a specific conversation in a crowded cafeteria. That's just what it's like being human, Jack said. Even we don't know what we're thinking half the time. Professor Nexvoon floated into the lecture hall, the fungoid collective pulsing with vibrant colors. The translator drone hovered alongside, converting the professor's spore patterns into speech. Today's lesson: adaptations and evolutionary responses to threats, the drone announced. Our case study, the human bluff response. Jack groaned as every head in the lecture hall turned toward him. The professor continued, spores pulsating enthusiastically. While many species evolved physical defenses, claws, toxins, protective exoskeletons, humans developed something far more interesting: the ability to convincingly lie under pressure. Holographic displays lit up around the room, showing scientific data on human stress responses alongside footage of Jack's confrontation with General Crux. When threatened, the human brain can create and commit to elaborate fabrications with such conviction that even empathic species cannot detect deception. This adaptation allowed primitive humans to deter predators and hostile tribes despite lacking significant physical advantages. Jack slumped down in his seat as his classmates studied him with newfound scientific interest. In short, the professor's translator concluded, humans weaponized storytelling long before they discovered actual weapons. A reluctant smile crept across Jack's face. Put that way, it sounded almost impressive. After class, Admiral Okafor intercepted Jack in the corridor. Her expression was unreadable, which in Jack's experience usually meant trouble. Cadet Harper, she said, walk with me. They moved through the curved hallways of the station in silence, until they reached a viewport overlooking the docking bay. Below, a Vexorian diplomatic vessel was preparing for departure. General Crux is returning to Vexor Prime today, the Admiral said. Before leaving, he requested something unexpected: your permanent assignment as human liaison to the Vexorian Cultural Exchange Program after graduation. Jack nearly choked. He wants me on Vexor Prime. Is this an elaborate execution plan? Admiral Okafor's lips twitched with the ghost of a smile. Quite the opposite. The General believes you represent the perfect example of human adaptability. He thinks exposure to your species' particular brand of problem-solving could benefit Vexorian military strategy. So my punishment is becoming a cultural ambassador? Jack asked incredulously. Your reward is becoming a bridge between species who desperately need to understand each other better, she corrected. The Federation needs officers who can think outside conventional parameters. With all due respect, Admiral, I created a diplomatic incident. You resolved a diplomatic incident, she countered. Unconventionally, yes, but effectively. That's a rare talent. As they watched, General Crux emerged from a turbo lift below, surrounded by his entourage. The General paused, looking up directly at where Jack and the Admiral stood. He raised a blue hand in what might have been a salute, or possibly a warning. I've accepted on your behalf, Admiral Okafor said. Consider it part of your continuing education in interspecies relations. Does this mean I'm not getting expelled? Jack asked hopefully. It means you're being closely watched, Cadet. The Federation has its eye on you, for better or worse. As General Crux boarded his vessel, Lieutenant Drax remained behind on the platform, clutching a stack of cultural exchange materials. The lieutenant would be continuing Jack's Vexorian education for the remainder of the semester. One more thing, Admiral Okafor added as she turned to leave. Your improvised biology lesson has inspired a new required course, defensive diplomacy. When words are your only weapons. You'll be giving the first guest lecture next week. Jack watched the Vexorian ship depart, its engines flaring bright against the blackness of space. Somehow, he'd transformed from near expulsion to becoming a cultural ambassador and guest lecturer. So slapping humans is now officially discouraged in galactic diplomatic protocols? Zentar asked, joining Jack at the viewport. It's being added to the official handbook under catastrophically bad ideas, Jack confirmed. Right between insulting a Draconian's ancestry and attempting to hug a Thoraxian, Zentar's scales rippled with amusement. You know the strangest part? I've been monitoring galactic communications channels as part of my encryption class. Applications to the Academy from Vexorian youth have increased 400% since the incident. Maybe they're all hoping to learn how to bluff like a human, Jack suggested. Or maybe, Zentar replied thoughtfully, they're hoping to learn that even the most rigid systems can be changed with the right kind of disruption. As they walked toward the cafeteria, Jack spotted a group of Vexorian cadets practicing what appeared to be human facial expressions in a reflection panel. Their attempts at smiling looked more like grimaces of pain, but it was progress. "There's a saying on Earth," Jack told Zentar. "Sometimes you have to shake things up to see where they settle. I just didn't expect to shake up the entire Galactic Order on my first semester." "Well," Zentar concluded, patting Jack's shoulder with 3 limbs simultaneously, "at least now everyone knows not to slap the humans. Who knows what you'll make them believe next time?" Jack grinned. "That my 6-armed friend is exactly what they're afraid of."